My friends, we are live for another episode of Remodelers on the Rise Live. Hello to people on YouTube, on LinkedIn, on the Remodelers Community Facebook group, on the Remodelers on the Rise Facebook page. We're all over the place. And I even already have received a like. Nancy, thank you for being a super fan. Okay, today what we're going to be getting into is a little bit of a presentation. I still love your comments. I would love your comments as we go through. But the presentation, the topic that I'm going to go through is something that is titled this: From Swinging the Hammer to Running a Business, Strategies for Taking Your Remodeling Company to the Next Level. It's a mouthful. It's a mouthful. And where this is coming from is I was reminded in a conversation I had a couple weeks ago of a presentation that I did at the International Builders Show back in January of 2020. It's been just about a year since the IBS. And it's a presentation that, frankly, I actually wrote it on the plane out to Vegas. You would think that a professional speaker like myself would have it all locked in and done. I kind of rewrote the whole thing on my way out. The problem for me is I tend to do my best work under pressure. Which applies a lot of pressure sometimes. Some of you might be able to relate. But I did this presentation. It was the only time that I did the presentation. It went very well. It was just a little different approach and approaching some of these topics in a different way. And when Bailey and I were talking about what are we going to do for the Tuesday Remodelers on the Rise show, I thought, you know what, I'm going to give an abbreviated version of this presentation to the people. So that's what we're going to do. Welcome. Again, would love your comments. So what we're going to do is I want to start by just talking about these three remodelers and kind of just three different places that a lot of remodelers find themselves in. You could be either 1, 2, or 3. I'm going to show you these 1, 2, or 3. Number 1, you're a remodeler who is still out in the field swinging the hammer 50% or more of the time. Okay, you're hustling, you're juggling sales, estimating, ordering, marketing, billing, all while still producing work out in the field as well. So that's number 1. Is that describing some of you? Perhaps. The second remodeler is number 2, is somebody who's a remodeler, and it's pretty rare that you're in the field doing the work. You've hired a team in the field, perhaps even someone to assist in the office. You're still the salesperson, estimator, and production manager. You continue to juggle a lot of hats, but you've gotten out of, for the most part, any of the actual swinging of the hammer. Of course, there's always times where you do, and you love those times, but you've kind of graduated into this level of things. So that's number 1 and number 2. And the third type of remodeler is your remodeler who is truly owning and running the business. Your job is primarily to manage the team that you have in place. You have an office manager, production manager, someone to help with estimating and design. You're still doing a bit of sales work, but primarily you're working on the business and managing your team. So a lot of you watching this, a lot of different remodelers, most likely you fall into one of those 3 categories. There may be some aspects where you're kind of between 1 and 2 or between 2 and 3, but that kind of summarizes where a lot of remodeling companies are. And in this presentation I did last year, what's kind of interesting is, one, the people that I am featuring out of these 3 examples I'm going to show, my client and myself look a little older. It's been a full year since I've done this. And also some of the numbers, I didn't go through and update some of the numbers, but I'll share a little bit as we go. But the principles that I'm going to talk about are still very much the same. So I'm going to talk about Ed with Renovations Unlimited. I'm going to talk about Stu with Innovative Builders and Remodelers. Oh, Stu, look at how smiley he is. He's always bubbly. And I'm going to talk about Brett with Oddfellows Contracting. Okay. As I go through this, a couple notes. Number 1, there's not one right way to do it. Well, if you want to design the perfect remodeling business, you do this, 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 and this. No, it's part of what I love about this business is that there's a lot of different ways that you can go about it. And number 2, even though there's not a one way to do it, there are a lot of key principles. key principles. In this little presentation, I've got 12 of them that all remodelers who have gotten into that second level, have gotten into that third level that I talked about before, have followed. And these are tried and true principles. Okay. And also we're focused kind of on the 20% of things that have led to 80% of the results. If you're going to continue to build a solid, profitable, thriving remodeling business that you control, that doesn't control you, there's going to be 472 things that you do in order to get from where you were to where you want to be. But about 20, there's 20% of the things that you really focus on that yields 80% of the results. It's this 80-20 rule, the Pareto principle that some of you may have heard of before. Okay, and then also I emphasized this when I presented this at IBS last year. You can do this. Part of this is being confident and putting in the work. So I'll share just kind of the 3 stories of these 3 remodelers. And again, I'm talking a little bit past tense because with each of these 3 remodelers, there's a whole nother year of progress that they've made since I presented this last year. But Ed has gotten fully out of that number 1 section of things where he was in the field, swinging the hammer and managing everything else. He's definitely into number 2 now, and he's really working on graduating from number 2 to number 3. Number 3 being, having a team that really runs the majority of the business for him. Now, what were the keys for Ed to go from being out in the field, managing everything, to being able to get solidly into the second level of things, of him being mostly, in this case, pretty much fully out of the field, still managing some sales and production manager, roles, but having a bit of a team around him? How did he get from number 1 to number 2? Okay. And there were definitely some keys that led him from where he was to where he's going. Number 1, he stinking wanted it. Like, there is a time where if you're frustrated, somebody posted on the Remodelers community board this morning, and I loved it because he's hungry. He wants to figure out, I've never talked to the man before, but Jerry, if you're listening, howdy, I see you out there. He's hungry to understand his numbers. He's sick of, I've been doing this for X number of years. I'm working my tail off. I continue to not make the type of money that I want. My stress level is way too high. I can't crack the code on how to stink and do this. And a lot of times in life, you get to the point where you're like, enough. Either I'm going to figure out how to fix this, or I'm going to go get myself a job and close my business. I worked over the years with all kinds of different remodelers, but I got a guy right now who got to the point where he stinking wants it now. Enough. No more of this. I don't know how to do it. No more of this. I'm going to kind of keep making excuses as to why I'm not making progress. He stinking wanted it. So in Ed's case, he got to that point. He's like, something's got to change. And you want to figure out how to go from one, the first level to the second to the third. This is a huge part of it. You got to be done playing games and ready to really build a business. So that's number 1, key number 1. There's going to be 12 keys. Key number 2, you know how he got out of the field and into a position where he's no longer swinging the hammer? He raised his markup. When you charge more for your work, there's more gross profit dollars. When you have more gross profit dollars, you have more ability to pay for your overhead expenses, to pay yourself, to hire people, to get support, to invest in coaching and marketing so you can figure out how to do this even quicker. How did Ed get away from the field? He stinking wanted it. And number 2, he raised his markup. Number 3, he changed his sales process and learned to be a better salesperson. If you're going to charge more, you better build the value of the service that you offer up. Right? That value needs to grow if your price is going to grow. Also in that is your confidence level. If you're shooting from the hip with your sales process, if you get on that initial phone call and you just pull out a blank sheet of paper and start taking some notes, I've done these initial calls plenty. I know what questions to ask. If you're not following an actual process, if you haven't honed that process, If you're doing free design and free estimates and you're just chasing everything that comes in and not qualifying leads, it's a recipe for being overwhelmed and for the work just to continue to pile up and never feel ahead. In Ed's case, he changed his sales process, number one, to implementing a project services agreement, where he started charging for detailed design and proposals. Okay. He still offers a free estimate. A free estimate is based on my years of experience, based on the project that we're talking about here. Your project's going to come in anywhere from this to this. There's your free estimate. Now, the next part of our process, if you want to get into the details, here's how we do that. He changed his sales process and started to implement these things. And that was a huge factor in him starting to save time and also in qualifying his leads so that he's working and investing more time with the quality leads and way less time on leads that he would just be spinning his wheels. Okay. So again, the presentation here is how does somebody like Ed get from swinging the hammer full time to getting into that next level of positioning himself to not be swinging the hammer so he can focus in other areas? Number one, he stinking wanted it. Number two, he raised his markup. Number three, he changed the sales process and learned to be a better salesperson. Are you just as good a salesperson as you are today as you were a year ago? Well, Kyle, that was dramatic. Well, I wanted to take a sip of water, but also that pause there was for emphasis. Because if you are, you ought to do something about that. Number four, he turned down non-ideal work. I remember early on when I was working with Ed, he would say something like, well, we got this lead from kind of a referral from a previous client, and it's for some electrical work. It's not really what we're focused on. We're focused on remodeling work, but that electrical work, we can have our trade partner go out and do that. We'll take care of kind of scheduling it and billing it and doing all of this. We can make a little bit of money, and then hey, that might turn into bigger projects in the future. You could play that game, but that is a lot of hustle, and that is a lot of lack of focus on what your ideal project is and who your ideal client is. When you start to turn down non-ideal work, you open up more space for your ideal work. Every minute that you spend chasing a project that is not ideal is a minute you're not spending driving forward on a project that is ideal, of keeping your cycle time and getting back to people quickly and managing the projects that you have quicker. You gotta work to really identify what your ideal client is and be confident in your strategy to turn down non-ideal work. It's critical to get yourself out of the field into the new level of things that we're talking about. This is another critical key, and for Ed, it was a mind shift to make sure that happens. We're better salespeople than in the past. Good, Nancy. It's because you're working at it. You're practicing it. Okay. So that was key number four. Key number five is he took less out of the business. Again, this was written at the start of 2020. So we're using some 19 and 18 references. He took less out of the business in 2019 than he did in 2018, even with a pretty solid increase in revenue. Okay. So when you are trying to get yourself out of the field and into a position where you're no longer swinging the hammer, you need to make investments in the business, right? When you're swinging the hammer, one of the nice things about that is you're very profitable, because from a standpoint of, you're self-performing the work, you're not paying somebody else to do it. Therefore, those jobs are a bit more profitable. The problem is you got a stinking business to run, and there's only so much capacity for you to do the work. You've got to figure out how to replace yourself in the field, right? And hire somebody, which sometimes that means, crap, if I hire somebody in the field, I got to sell more. That balancing act, right? I got to sell more in order to pay for all of my expenses and still take the type of salary that I want. There's that bubble to kind of bust through. And, in Ed's case, he was smart where he said, I'm going to try to keep what I take out of the business right here. Even though I could take another 20 grand out of the business, I'm going to reinvest that into my business so that I can bust through and get myself out of the field. There's a lot of different ways to slice that, but understand that sometimes it's wiser to take those dollars that you have left over and as you're building the business and reinvest it in the business in order for you to continue moving forward, even though the temptation is there to take bigger draws out. Okay. There's a lot of different factors involved there, but that's something in Ed's case that really propelled him forward. Number six, Transformed. Ooh, I changed the video aspect of it. Number 6 key for him getting from where he was to where he is. He transformed a C team into an A minus team, a C team into an A minus team. Sometimes that requires letting go of the person that's just not performing very well. Sometimes that means continually recruiting, looking for that higher caliber employee. It is so much easier to grow your remodeling business when you have talented team members that you might have to pay more for, hence why you need to raise your markup, hence why you need to become a better salesperson, than it is to try to grow your business when you're putting together this team of C players. And that just continues to happen. How do you continue to train them? How do you have the understanding that you need to let go of certain people when they're not a good fit and they're not performing? How do you continue to recruit and find the time to recruit and continue to improve your team from a C team to an A team, C team to a B team? So that's a key thing that Ed did, is he continued to go through some people, get better at his hiring process, get clear with what he's looking for, and really also started to put up with a less out in the field and made people step up. Okay. In his case, this was again back in the start of 2020. Over 2018, 2019, he went from 500K in sales up to $1 million. He's had a banner year. He's grown that tremendously this year. In the midst of the pandemic and here in Michigan being shut down for 6 weeks last year. He's well on his way. Still has a lot of stress in his business, still has a lot of things to continue to work through. But those were the keys that got him from where he was to where he was when I wrote this presentation. He stinking wanted it. He raised his markup. He changed his sales process and became a better salesperson, turned down non-ideal work, took less out of the business and reinvested those dollars, even though the business grew in revenue. And he focused on transforming his C team to an A team. Okay, do you see how these, let me kind of pause there. Do you see how these principles these aren't foreign concepts, but what was interesting when I put this presentation together for IBS, and I think why it resonated, is there's a lot of mystery around it. How do I go from being stressed out in the field to getting to that next level of my remodeling business? How do I get from that number 2 to number 3 where I'm truly just working on my business? It is not super mysterious. When I look at, in that case, certainly Ed, but when I also look at that for a lot of my other clients who have gone from that in the field full-time to out of the field full-time to continuing to own the business, these are the principles. You got to have the desire. You got to understand your numbers and update your markup. You got to become a better salesperson. You got to build that team around you. There is no magic bullet. There's no one thing you're going to do, but these principles are the things that if you focus on this and work on getting these in place, that's what's going to propel you forward. Okay. All right, cool. So let me keep going with this presentation. We've gone through 6 of the keys. I'm going to share a few more. This is my boy Stu. Stu's gone from kind of in the field fully to fully out of the field to now sometimes really in that third category of really just managing his team and running the business. He kind of gravitates between number 2 and number 3, and I'll share a few insights and keys. In his case, some of those things that we listed out for Ed, those 1 through 6, he really leaned into 1, 2, and 3 of that. When I started working with him many years ago, 1 was he stinking wanted it. He had gotten up to that point where he's like, something's got to change. He hit that as well. He raised his markup and he changed his sales process to be a better salesperson. Key number 7 for him is that he stopped making excuses for not understanding his numbers and he dug in. Numbers did not necessarily come super easy to Stu. I remember sitting down and just going through the P&L statement, explaining how markup works, explaining how to go through job costing. And as time went on, as he continued to dig into it, he got better and better and better at it. You're not going to snap a finger and go from, I'm not really that clear with my numbers and I'm not that good at it, to really having them honed in and really truly understanding it. It takes time. But in Stu's case, he would say, look, if I can figure this out, if I can get locked and loaded with these numbers and understand how it all works, anybody can. But he just stopped making excuses and he just started to dig in. He asked questions. He went through training. He invested in coaching, and he went from just being super unclear of where's the money to understanding where the money is. And once you know it, then when you start to understand your numbers, you get more profitable in a hurry. It gives you the confidence to look at and adjust your markup. It gives you confidence to understand your estimating at a deeper level. You start to really care about job costing, and you see how it all plays together on your overall P&L statement. What's super cool about Stu, this was not so much this year, but the year prior, I remember talking to him in December. I'm like, hey, Stu, like, what's your game plan for, end of year? If you met with your tax person, talked about this, that, and Stu schooled me on it. I mean, he didn't school me. I knew all the stuff he was talking about too, because I know numbers too. But it was night and day. Like, he was given a clinic. Well, Kyle, I'm asking questions. Kyle, I've already thought about that. Here's what we're doing related to that. Well, what about this, Stu? No, we already talked about that. I've decided to do this versus that. Well, what about that? He had my questions answered before I could even ask them. Right? He's gotten to another level of truly knowing his numbers, and he's incredibly more profitable because of that, and just running a much more solid business. So number 7, stopped making excuses for not understanding his numbers and dug in. Number 8, he has focused on giving a truly remarkable client experience. The experience that you give your clients compared to the success of your business long term, those two things correlate. And Stu is obsessed with giving his clients a wonderful experience. The communication, the timeliness, the delivering of bad news and being prompt with it, the dealing with the problems that come up head on, the just bringing a team together that cares about the client, that is focused on giving them a wonderful experience. If you want to continue to move your business forward, this key of really putting a concerted effort towards giving your clients a wonderful experience is a huge key. Okay, so that's number 8. Number 9, in Stu's case, as I reflect back on how he's been able to arrive where he's at in his business and move tremendously forward, he was very patient with his key hires. He hired slowly. I remember him having interviews with people and be like, they sound pretty good. Why not give them a shot? Nah, they're not the right one. Nah, it's not. I'm just not feeling like they're the right one. He was just very, very patient, and over time, he got his office manager in place. Don is tremendous in that role. He got some of his lead carpenters in place. He's just put together his team, but he's very patient with it. And that's a good reminder, is sometimes this doesn't happen overnight. Sometimes it takes a little bit of time to get that team around you. That's been a huge key for Stu. And I would say the best part of Stu's story is, I learned this quote from somebody I follow, and it says, failure at home is no exchange for success at the office. He's got 3 kids. I think he's got 3 kids, yeah. 2 boys and a girl? I think so. Can't tell you their name. But he's married, he's got 3 kids, and has gone from being stressed out, getting up early, coming home late, still having a bunch of work to do, to really being in control of his business. And part of the reason he had the tenacity to see through the things that he needed to do to make the changes is because he wanted his family life to be rock solid. He wanted his marriage to have the time and effort and focus that it needed. He cares about being a really good dad. And you've got to make changes in your business. If it's out of whack right now, if the business is controlling you, if your work-life balance is all out of whack, these are the keys that you need to do. I just went through 8 of them so far out of the 12. These are the keys. You can do it. I put that at one of the first slides. You can do this. This isn't impossible. I'm imagining talking a couple of remodelers, or one remodeler listening to this, who is so overwhelmed and frustrated by their business, wondering how to get out of the field, get to that next level, make sure he's profitable or she's profitable, make sure they're giving a wonderful experience to the client. It's a series of doing these things that I'm talking about. You can do it. It's possible. Okay, so to me, that's the best part of Stu's story, is the fact that his work-life balance has been great. The other thing to note is, he has the ability to really step into that 3rd tier that I referenced at the start, which really gets into just fully running the business, not being involved in the day in and day out. He's got a salesperson that he can lean on. He's got production help. And he really found when he leaned into that, he didn't really like it. He didn't like it. He missed the hustle and bustle of going to different job sites, of visiting with clients, and he's really adjusted his schedule to make sure he's out in the field a little bit with the team swinging the hammer from time to time. At least back when I wrote this at the start of 2020, and that's been tremendous for his own mental health and enjoyment, and also great for training the team. See the boss man occasionally on the job site. He's just kind of adjusted to design the business to be in a way that he really enjoys and that he really likes. So, getting clear with why do you want to grow is an important consideration. Why do you want to grow? Do you want to grow so that you're fully out of the field and you can just be riding off in the sunset? Do you want to grow so that you can pick and choose the parts of the business you want to focus on? It's an important thing to kind of consider that. All right. So I'm going through this presentation. I hope it's helpful. Again, this is a presentation that I did at the 2020 International Builders Show. You can see on the screen, Stu's gone from, in 2012, about $750,000 to 2019, he was tickling $3 million. This past year, he's far surpassed that. But he's in a bit of a sweet spot. He almost wants to cap his growth at a certain level because he's at a level where it's just a very solid sweet spot from a workload standpoint, from a team size standpoint, and from a profitability standpoint. So that's also something to consider. Why do I want to grow? Making sure that when you find a sweet spot, it might be good to just sit in there and continue to tweak. All right. And then lastly, I just want to share a few things about my boy Brett here, longtime client of mine, Oddfellows Contracting up here in Michigan. And in Brett's case, all of those keys that we've already hit on were key to him, but I'll highlight a few of them. That one that I mentioned when we were talking about Ed, I think it was number 4, related to non-ideal work. When I started working with Brett years and years ago, when we were looking and analyzing his projects, 65% of his overall number of projects, 65% of his overall number of projects resulted in 5% of his revenue. Follow me there? What does that mean? That means a lot of his projects were just small handyman, small type projects. And when he made the shift to turning down non-ideal work and just focusing more and more of their time, energy, and effort on his ideal projects, which cut down on the number of projects tremendously, which drove up the average cost of the project, things got so much easier for him. He did a ton of work around the sales process, started charging for design and project development. And another key that really has propelled him into where he is now, which is fully into that third level that I described earlier of truly just running the business and managing the team underneath him, is he has taken that call to build an A team around him very seriously. And what he's really found is that A players attract A players. And it takes a while to get them in place. It takes some trial and error, letting go of certain people to make room for better team members. But those team members tell other people, and A players attract A players. And Brett has been able to see that very clearly. And three more keys that allowed Brett to get to where he's at. He took risks and thought big. I should say that. Key number 10, took risks and thought big. He invested in new hires and investments in the business before me as his coach was comfortable. Brett, dude, I don't like how much you have in the bank compared to this. Like, you're stretching yourself a little bit. Are you sure you want to do this? Maybe we should wait 4 months and get a little bit more stronger. And his gut level of dealing with the uncertainty that did, and trusting that it was the right move to make at that time, has paid off for him. He took some risks and he thought big. He wanted to build a business where he is truly able just to work on fine-tuning the business and is fully out of the day in and day out sales, production, all of it. And he's been able to do that. But a huge part of that was he took some risks. He thought big. Sometimes I had to reel him back in, but as I reflect back on it, it's been the key to getting him to where he's at. Number 11, he invested in his brand and his marketing. He spent a good amount of money on a jingle. Oddfellows Contracting, beautiful spaces, something like that. I'm a better singer than that. That was not my best work. But he had a jingle. He still puts really good money behind, TV advertising. He's really invested in his marketing to build a brand, to build a lead flow that is consistent in a lot of different ways. And that's allowed for a consistent flow of leads and for them to be able to pick through and pick the ones that are best fit for them. That's been a huge key to him being able to get to where he's at. And number 12, he's really enjoyed the journey. There's this phrase that he hit me with a few years ago that, if you walk up to somebody and say, so when are you going to hit your full potential? What does that mean for you? What does full potential mean? And I think for a lot of people, when you start to think about it, nobody's going to answer, well, I've hit my full potential. I think this is as good as I'm ever going to get. Nobody says that, right? And in his case, he's like, I don't know where this business is going. I don't know how big I'm going to grow it. But I do know that I'm wanting to see where my full potential lands. I'm just going to keep pursuing things. I'm going to keep making things better. I'm going to keep building a great team around me. I'm going to keep wowing clients. And I think that's part of it. He's really enjoyed the process and the challenge of building a business. He's been wanting to build what he's now built for a number of years. And now he's going on to, what is the next version of this? What's the next iteration of this look like? So making sure that you're just enjoying the journey, that you're growing for the right reasons has been a very big key for him. Cool. So I took and he's been growing. So I took kind of this presentation that I did at the International Builders Show. I boiled it down to a 30-minute Remodelers on the Rise show. I presented this at IBS over 60 minutes, which allowed me to unpack it a little bit more. But I do hope that the way that we went through this and the keys that we hit on are either good reminders or there's one key in there that you're going to focus in on and really work to improve in your remodeling business. I'll review the keys one more time. Number one, you got to stinking want it. If you want to move forward in your business, you got to want it. I think you understand what I mean. You got to want it. There's got to be some drive and desire, because you're going to have to put in the work and the effort and the change in order to make all that happen. You better want it. Okay. Number two, you got to raise your markup. So many of you are not charging what you need to charge, especially if you're out in the field full time and you can't figure out how to get yourself out of the field into that new position of managing projects and the rest of the business. More likely than not, you're not charging enough, and you've got to get really clear with that. Number three, you got to keep improving your sales process and become better salespeople. A lot of times that's going to mean, especially for kitchen and bath remodelers, that you got to have some type of design and project development process in place that you're charging for. If you want training on that, let me know. Number four, you got to turn down non-ideal work to make room for ideal work. Number five, you got to invest in the business. Don't continue as your business grows or revenue grows or profit grows to just keep drawing all of the profit out of the business for your own budget, but make sure that you're reinvesting those dollars. Number six, continue to work on building an A team of trade people, trade partners, in-house labor. Don't put up with C players. It's a key to being able to grow. Number seven, don't make excuses about not understanding your numbers. Dig in. You can do this. Number eight, make sure that banner of we want to deliver our clients a remarkable experience is something that everybody on your team knows, and making sure that so much of your decisions and your work on processes is focused on how can we give our clients a wonderful experience, and just keep improving that. Find one way to improve that this month and continue month in, month out. Number nine, be patient with your key hires. Make sure you got the right people. And then the last three I just hit on for Brett, who's really taken his business to that third level I talked about. Sometimes you got to take some risks. You got to think big. Number 11, invest in your brand and marketing. Number 12, make sure you're enjoying the journey. You can do this. Be confident. Put in the work. Cool. So that was my presentation, my friends. A little different vibe than most of our Remodelers on the Rise shows, but I do hope you enjoyed it. Didn't get a lot of comments, mostly because I was presenting, but I saw a lot of eyeballs on this, and hope you enjoyed it. I'm out of here. On Thursday, I'm going to have my friend and colleague David Loopberger on the show. We're going to talk about succession planning and whatever else I might get Dave to talk about, but that's going to be the primary focus, because it's a lot of the focus that he's putting on. It'll be fun. He's a good dude. Very soothing voice. My voice, very kind of in your face and a little nasally. David, smooth. All right, we have that to look forward to. I'll see y'all later. Reach out anytime.